Bona tarda, molt benvinguts, molt benvingudes a aquesta primera sessió de tarda del Congrés que porta per títol Noves narratives i llenguatges per arribar als joves. Especialment la benvinguda la voldria donar al públic jove que ens acompanya perquè anem a parlar d'ells i està molt bé que ells hi siguin. Per tant, gràcies per estar aquí. Començarem amb una ponència del doctor Spinelli. Després, les persones que m'acompanyen en aquest escenari debatran sobre el tema que ens ocupa avui. Per tant, sense més preludis, I want to introduce you Professor Martin Spinelli. Martin Spinelli is Professor of Podcasting at the University of Sussex, United Kingdom. He's one of the most quoted researchers in the field of podcasting in his country. Lead editor on the Bloomsbury Podcast Studies book series. He's also director of the children's media production company Resilience Limited. Resilience produces podcasts and quality transmedia content for kids. Today, he will discuss the evolving context of narrative aimed at reaching young people using various cases of examples. He will illustrate this through two key principles that, if I am not wrong, in his view, can engage young audiences with audio content, participation, and integration. So, Dr. Spinelli, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sylvia, and thank you very much to the conference organizers for your very generous invitation to me. It's been a splendid day so far. Thank you also for allowing me to present in English. So I will be talking today about new narratives and new languages to reach young people. And at the outset, I should say that my references in this talk are all from the Anglophone podcasting space. I flagged that up at the beginning because cultural difference is something that's very important to me, and because narratives, and obviously even more so languages, are highly context-specific and culturally specific and quite niche. So rather than offering a list of new languages and new narratives that have come across my mind, I think it would be more useful for me to share a bit about the methods and the principles for finding and discovering new narratives and new languages that I and my creative and research partners have been using for the past few years. And I think that will probably be more useful to you all as well in terms of things that you may be able to take and work with in your own countries, in your own contexts. So the two principles that have come to the fore most for me over the past 5 years are integration and participation. So those are the things that have come to me in terms of what I have learned in my own work for the past 5 years in the kids media space, particularly the kids podcasting space. So by participation, I mean beneficiaries, listeners, users, actively engaging with the project, often in the development stage, either through offering content or offering editorial input or willingness to co-create, and in some cases, actual involvement in the production themselves. The photo in the background of this slide is from a co-creation workshop that we ran in the city of Leicester in the north of England a couple of years ago at the beginning of one of our projects. By integration, I mean conceiving of projects as transmedia, that is, the same project or the same story on multiple platforms in multiple places, very carefully curated by us, not random, but in a highly thoughtful way. And this maximizes the opportunity for contact and interaction with our intended beneficiaries through technology that they already have enmeshed in their lives. And generally, when thinking about these two, participation and integration, I find broadly in kids' podcast production that we're better at participation than we are at integration. So a quick caveat about the idea of participation in academic research contexts versus in production contexts. At my university, the University of Sussex, and I imagine at other universities here in Spain abroad, the idea of participation is having a moment. There are a lot of people very interested in doing participatory research. But while participatory methods may be a great way to scope out ideas for a new project, or develop a survey, for example, in production projects, in practice-led projects, I find that an over-reliance on participation can create problems. Most successful kids podcasts that include participation, and by that I mean the ones that are the greatest at getting impact, having impact on the most people, are ones in which the participation is managed quite carefully by professionals. So last month, I published in the website Participatory Methods an article about balancing co-creation with high impact on our project called the RES, which I'm going to be talking about in a few minutes. So before I start talking about the RES and these principles of integration and participation, I've pulled together a few examples from other quite well-known kids podcasts and some thoughts about how they engage with these two principles. And obviously I could have chosen from dozens and dozens of other kids podcasts, but these were the two that came to me as I was preparing to do this talk. So the first one is the Children's Hour, which was born as a radio program before podcasting had the cultural momentum that it has now. It's a current issues magazine in which a kids crew help with the development of episode ideas. They help to synthesize questions. They collaboratively interview the guests, all with an adult host managing things and intervening as necessary. So it's quite highly participatory. However, they're not very good at integration. They don't do much by way of integration. The second one on the list is called Story Pirates, and that's presented by Gimlet Media, and that one easily has the most financial resources behind it of any podcast that I will talk about today and mention today. So it's all about participation, 100% about participation. So the format is children from around the US send the Story Pirates production team their own stories that they made up, non-derivative stories, not stories based on the latest Marvel film or some folktale, but ones that they have been the original author of in a total way. And then Story Pirates takes these story ideas and shapes them into good audio narratives, often adding a lot of narrative structuring to make what's a kind of quirky idea into a more engaging story with a recognizable tension and a recognizable arc. And they have quite an impressive team behind them, and they've gotten involved some very high-profile actors like Julie Andrews, Lin-Manuel Miranda, and Claire Danes. And in terms of integration, they are doing more than the Children's Hour in that they offer teaching materials for English language classes in the US that refer to the episodes of the Story Pirates. The third one that I've pulled out here is The Big Melt, which is an investigative series into global warming, which is hosted by a young person named Sarah, who's got a deep interest in the climate crisis. And it's got a very, very strong by young people, for young people feeling to it. And in terms of integration, Sarah and the producers of The Big Melt and producers of other shows on the Gen Z Media Network will most weeks during the academic year in the US do a Zoom with a classroom somewhere in the US to talk about, with the children, the ideas of the show, the latest episode, and broader concerns about the environment. So while Story Pirates and The Big Melt certainly offer more in terms of educational classroom integration and content, to my mind, these bits of integration are sort of bolted on after the fact. They're primarily thinking initially of making a podcast, and then after the fact, they're bolting on these talks in schools and these lesson plans. So, turning now to The Res, my own major kids project. So The Res is a sci-fi adventure drama podcast. It's a podcast-centric transmedia project for 7 to 11-year-olds. And its goal is to move the needle a little bit on a very serious and big international crisis, the adolescent mental health crisis, which has been spiking in the developed world since 2011. And it does this by messaging, by modeling less harmful behavior, and by providing opportunities for young people to practice kindness and healthier ways of relating to and using media, especially social media. In order to have even a small amount of impact on a crisis that is international in scope, like the adolescent mental health crisis, it seemed very, very clear that we needed to be pitching what we were doing to a large audience. So The Res, like all our recent work, is built on the latest child development research. For The Res, we drew on research from the Center for Research on Kindness into Children's Well-Being and on research into healthy media diets and mental health from the Cress Lab and from the Digital Wellness Lab at the Boston Children's Hospital in the US. And our team included award-winning industry writers, actors, directors, and creatives. And as the project unfolded over the few years that it's been running, we developed a solid integration plan. And we've been quite lucky and enjoyed a fair bit of success for a project that was produced with a relatively small amount of money with no big media institutional support. So the series is approaching 1 million downloads. It's charted in the top 10 in both the UK and in the US in category, and it's been the #1 podcast in a number of other countries. This summer, it was #7 in category here in Spain. So in terms of participation, we took a lot of cues from existing shows, some of those shows that I mentioned a minute ago, and projects. So each iteration of The Res begins with co-creation workshops with children in coastal poor, economically challenged, or ethnically diverse communities in England. The main point of these workshops is to get kids making things and to boost their creative skills, largely around comic book and comic strip writing and drawing. So what we do is we bring in a professional artist and a professional writer, and they give some demonstrations, and they give some tips and some guidance to the young people participating in the workshop, and then they go around the room and they support the kids as they make an attempt at coming up with their own comic strip or their own comic characters. While that's going on, one of our team introduces the Res story world to them, and then we invite them to brainstorm and suggest to us new characters, new stories, and new ideas. We also ask them about their main issues of worry or concern at the moment. And some of them from this workshop mention things like transitioning from primary school to secondary school, dealing with bullying, and again, the climate crisis. And this is has been a great way for us of generating new narratives, new story ideas that we then take off the back of these workshops into our writers' rooms when we're developing the overarching series arc and the ideas and content for each individual episode. Also, in terms of participation, we've created a story device in the res, which is a hacked old phone. It's a phone in the story, in the podcast drama, that the characters, the two main characters, use to communicate with the kids of the past, the real kids like that. And they ask those kids for help and advice on particular problems. And this is a really nice way of getting the voices of real kids from the 2020s into this futuristic podcast, and it has generated a lot of interest among participants and also among other children's podcast producers. We also obviously have a highly interactive website experience that offers many, many, many routes and activities for participation. We've been thinking quite hard about integration since we started with the res, using the podcast, using the website, using the phones already very much in the lives of our beneficiaries. We wanted to use what they had in their hands already rather than trying to kind of create something new as a way of getting them invested in the story and to help them spread the word about the story and perhaps get them involved in helping us generate some new languages and some new narratives for upcoming iterations of the project. For season 2, we developed a fictional device called an EKP, again in the story, EKP for Electro-Kindness Pulse, which the two main characters use in the story to zap some empathy and some humanity into the villain for good effect. So the characters in the story are encouraging the listeners to tally up, count up their kindnesses, the kind things they do in everyday life, and then go onto the website and log them on the EKP. And that red screenshot is one of the shots of the EKP. And when there's enough charge in the EKP, the characters in the story then use that charge to save the day, to turn the narrative around, to make it end happily. More conventionally, we offer free merchandise to teachers to get the res into schools. We have a robust legacy and social media outreach, which has led to some great national coverage. And after the project had been up and running for a few months, teachers told us wonderfully, it's something we could not have imagined, that organically, completely off the backs of the children, res clubs had started to form on the playgrounds during recess, where the kids were acting out, role-playing the characters and extending the narrative in new ways on their own, which was a really wonderful and lovely, unexpected moment for us. Our main integration vehicle into schools has been PSHE Association accredited lesson plans, specifically for primary schools, although they're used in other schools as well. PSHE stands for Personal, Social, Health, and Economic Education, and that's part of the national curriculum in the UK. Interestingly, it is the subject that primary school teachers say they hate teaching the most and their students hate the most to have to engage with, because the materials, the teaching materials, are so worthy and dry and dull and boring. So we put together a really fun and funny and slightly silly and beautifully designed and produced set of lesson plans and teacher's guides, which have proved really appealing. The map behind is the places where teachers have requested extra merch from us to use in conjunction with the lesson plans. We have one in Spain. We've had about 8,500 downloads of our lesson plans, so even if only 5% of those lesson plans are actually being used, that's 400 schools in which it's being used. 200 schools to date have requested that extra merch for supplements to their PSHE teaching using res materials. With our new 2024 project A to Z, we pushed this idea of integration even further. So we wanted to catch a zeitgeist that parents and teachers were thinking about and worrying about, and that kids were hearing about. The AI moment, artificial intelligence, really began to pick up popular momentum around this time last year, in autumn of 2023. We wanted to do something different, noticing the discourse that was happening around AI, particularly in AI and kids. So we wanted A to Z to reframe that debate around AI and young people away from panic and fear and alarm, and to reframe the debate around young people in AI that wasn't unrealistic, wasn't avoidant, wasn't refusenik, and to make it more proactive, to kind of push it in a proactive direction. We set out to create a safer, healthier, guardrailed AI for kids who were curious about AI and for parents who were concerned about their kids' media diets. So we created a story in which a socially awkward inventor named Zux, no connection whatsoever to Mark Zuckerberg, is the character in the black on the left. He creates an AI named Eileen, spelled A-I-L-E-E-N, the yellow triangle on the right. So Zux creates Eileen, this AI, for companionship, essentially to agree with him whenever he says anything and to flatter his ego. In the course of the drama, Eileen develops in ways that Zux could not have expected and anticipated. Integrated into the story was a real Eileen, a kid-safe AI chatbot that we made available through the App Store and the Google Play Store. So the AI in the podcast story really exists as an AI that our beneficiaries can download and use on the phones that are already in their lives. The AI in the story is something that they can play with, talk with, converse with about the podcast itself. The different tranches of activities are organized around the content of each episode, but they can also talk with it about other things that are on their minds in safeguarded ways. The app was built by ethical developers with a long history of working in educational contexts, a company called Millipedia Ethical Digital that we've worked on many projects with for years. And it drew on open source research both into kindness and healthy relationships to and through media. The experience flow of the app models and facilitates those healthier relationships by popping the users out, popping the beneficiaries, the people who are using the app, off of the device, off of the app, into the real world to have real conversations with real people and to do real-world material activities, each of which is grounded in some research and has been shown to have some positive mental health benefit. As the beneficiaries were engaging with Eileen, we were also collecting their anonymized user logs. And these have been a really great, unexpected treasure trove of new and interesting potential ideas and plots and stories that we are going to take forward into our new projects produced by these young people themselves. So the text in the background of this slide is a screen grab from one of their logs, and these generally show quite a deep engagement with the story and its concepts. We had the logs generated primarily so that we could monitor how well our safeguards were working, how well our guardrails were holding up. The added bonus of them was that we were really getting these great insights and ideas that we're going to work with narratively in the future. I will be done in one. Over the past 5 years, my partner at Resilience Limited, Lance Dan, and I have carefully been documenting our work on these projects as practice-led research. We've come up with 11 points, which are going to be published next year, which we are taking forward into our own media for well-being projects. This is the list. I'll just quickly number them and then I'll sit down. Integration is the key. Co-creation, participation is really important. Niche targeting has to be in the foreground. Listening is intimate. Kids respond better to relationships they find as familiar. Schools are the gateway to really high engagement. Using direct address whenever possible in all content is really great for kids. Lean, long-running, repeatable formats are the only way to make work like this cost-effective. Network loyalty, intra-network, intra-program promotion is a really, really great way to get your podcast in front of new ears. Intelligent, minimal socials and grants, sponsorships, and IP development are the way to fund this kind of work rather than advertising. Thank you very much for your attention. Over.